Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be reviewing the Sony MDR-7506 headphones. I hope you enjoy it. As I said, today we're talking about the Sony MDR-7506 headphones. Here they are. They're $90 on Amazon in the US, so it gives you an idea what the price point is. I think they represent very good to excellent value, and I'll talk more about that at the end of the review. But first, let's get into the punchline here, which is they sound quite good. You probably have to take into account that they're $90 headphones to say that. There are certainly better headphones at higher prices. But you might have to spend quite a bit to get a headphone that trumps these on all accounts. So let's start here. As you know, I like to classify headphones into three groups because I think listeners tend to have a preference for one of these three sonic profiles. The three sonic profiles are warm and soft. That's one. The second one is dynamic transparency, and the third one is mid-range focused. These are, in my view, dynamic transparency headphones. They will appeal to people who like that profile, and as you go through my various reviews of headphones, maybe you'll start to form a point of view on where you land on that. I personally think that people who want to listen in the foreground, that is, they want to really concentrate on the music, hear what's going on, are concerned about issues of accuracy, will almost always tend toward a dynamic transparency headphone, at least at higher price points, sometimes to a mid-range focused headphone at lower price points. That's why I was kind of surprised by the performance of these, because it's a $90 headphone that as a dynamic transparency headphone actually does fairly well. Okay, let's enumerate what we mean by fairly well. First of all, the top to bottom balance, and by top to bottom, I mean from the treble down into the bass, the overall general balance is pretty flat. We'll talk about details within that in a minute, but generally pretty flat. I would say some of you might come away with the point of view that they're slightly bright, and you also might come away with the point of view that there's a little bit of elevation in the bass range. But these are actually relatively small deviations from flatness, so I think a lot of people would listen to these headphones and go, wow, those actually perform pretty well on what for most people is the most basic test, which is bass, mid-range, treble balance. Pretty good on that score. The second thing I think you would like about the MDR-7506s is that the clarity just stands out. They're not overly crisp. They're not doing something that is annoying to generate that clarity. I think it's really the lower mid-range into the bottom of the upper mid-range, which is where most of the music is. That band is quite well done, and so they sound pretty clear, and they have well-balanced bass below that and well-balanced treble above that, so that you feel like, wow, I'm really hearing pretty well what's going on. So that's the second thing that I liked about them, that sense of clarity. The third thing that I think is a real pro for the 7506s is that the bass tuning, and I find that bass is a range that a lot of listeners really pay attention to, has got a slight rise, but it's in the mid or maybe lower mid bass, which is where you want to get a little bit of pop and weight and sense of foundation in the music, particularly if you listen to popular music, but it's also perfectly enjoyable on classical music as well, and certainly on jazz. There's just a lot going on below 100 hertz, and you want that to seem punchy and to have good drive. And these do a respectable job on that front. Okay, so those are a series of qualities that I think would lead just about anybody to go, wow, these are pretty good and quite listenable headphones. I'll be back in a minute and talk about some of the issues, maybe, the complaints you could make about the sound profile here. But anyway, let's go into that detail in a minute. Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks, and now back to the show. Okay, I said that I would detail some of the cons that go along with the pros, because you sort of have to imagine that a $90 headphone isn't going to do everything perfectly, and a lot of the things that these Sonys do well, frankly, are the most important things. So let's get into some of the details of where you might find that these fall short and might decide that there's a better headphone for you, might decide that you're willing to spend a little bit more money. Okay, con number one, I would say, not necessarily the most important, but the first thing that comes to mind is that I think in the mid-bass to upper bass transition, in the probably 90 to 200 hertz range, there's a little bit of a dip in the response that means that the air and the openness of some bass instruments, the detail of plucked strings, for example, or after a drum whack, the sense of the skin resonating, that sense is a little bit diminished, and there's a little bit of clouding or slight opaqueness to what's going on in that range. This is being really picky. I'm telling you why these aren't $5,000 headphones, but that's one point that I think you would find. There's a similar effect. I would say there is a dip in the 2 to 4K region. That's my estimation. It's not based on measurements that I did, but there's a little bit of dip in the upper mid-range before the transition to treble. And that dip again creates a slightly hooded or shaded effect to some kinds of vocals, particularly female vocals, although on occasion where the record is or the LP is too close mic'd, you might find that it actually improves things a little bit. But there's a sense of not complete openness in the upper mid-range. All right. The third con, I would say, is that I think the treble, both the balance, which I mentioned earlier, but also the transparency in the treble range isn't ideal. I would say the lower treble, where there's still a lot of activity, a lot of harmonics and overtones, just has a little bit of excess brightness, a little bit of a transient attack unnaturalness that makes the treble both call your attention to it and stand out a little bit. I think not quite so much because of elevation, but also because of its character, its slightly unnatural character. And that's something that, significantly higher priced headphones will often address. At least that's why they exist, and that's what they're there to address. You can look at my Hi-Fi Man Susvara review on this channel and see a headphone that gets around some of the issues that I'm talking about. But still, let's come back and say, this is a $90 headphone. frankly, if I were someone who was interested in $500 or $1,000 or $1,500 headphones or the spread above that, I would make sure I had a pair of these in my headphone area just to use as a reference to make sure that I wasn't burning money needlessly. Because there are headphones, I think particularly in the $500 to $750 region, that I don't think outperform these. I've heard a number of them, and frankly, I'd rather listen to the Sonys. Yes, I can pick out the issues with the Sonys. I can pick out the issues with those $500 and $750 headphones too. And some of them, I think, have bigger issues than these do. So, if you think I'm positively impressed, yes, I'm accounting for value. The $90 price point brings a level of respect to the proceedings that you might not get if these were $900, and I might sound a little bit harsher. But for $90, I think this is both a great starting point if you just want to get a good pair of headphones instead of whatever came with your phone or whatever you had lying around or whatever hand-me-down you got or the mistake you bought for 50 or 75 bucks or even the mistake you paid $200 for. I think you would really enjoy these if you like the sound of music and if you have an appropriate amplifier and signal to drive them. All right, let's talk a little bit about the physical properties of these because, headphones are physical objects and you have a particular use case and I don't know what that is, so I'm going to try to outline this. First of all, they're wired. You can see that, and you may be totally into wireless headphones. Please watch my Sony MDR-7506 review for a conversation about why wireless headphones are never going to sound as good as wired headphones for the most part. Okay, so I think you want wired headphones if you want the highest quality. If quality is not your thing and you have a usage case that requires you to have wireless headphones, I get it. That's legit. Then forget about these. They do also fold up so you can do this. I recently reviewed these Audio-Technicas that I have somewhere here. Yep, let me grab them. These Audio-Technicas. These are, I think, $179 or something like that. And they fold up, but not quite as nicely as these. I'll talk in a minute about how they sound compared to these because it's the logical competitor. The Sonys also have slightly smallish ear cups. So they are over the ear for sure, but I think you will find if you put them on, as I will do here, and I'll put them on the correct way, that they will slightly touch your outer ear, and that may be an issue for you, or it may be perfectly fine. And I would say these faux leather ear pads, they're not very breathable, and if you work in a hot environment, you may find that they get a little bit warm and there's a little bit of perspiration transferred to them, and that might not be ideal. I thought the pressure level was on the high side of medium. I know that might sound a little bit odd, but you definitely notice the pressure. The good news about that is if you are, say, working at your desk while listening to your headphones and you tend to move around, grab a piece of paper, whatever it is you might do, these will stay nicely attached to your head. Again, they're not headphones for working out in the gym. That's the territory of earbuds or bone conducting headphones or something like that. But if you're just, a desk worker and you do a little bit of this, the clamping force is not so high that it's painful, and I think they work pretty well. So, as I said, I like these headphones. I do want to spend 1 minute as a sign-off talking about how these compare to the Audio-Technicas that I previously reviewed. The Audio-Technicas are about twice the price, as I said. The Audio-Technicas, I think, have a little bit less of the lumpiness in the upper bass and upper mid-range that I noticed on the Sonys. I think the treble on the Audio-Technicas, although it's a little bit emphasized, is a little bit smoother and more accurate and more detailed. But I want to caution you with one thing. I think you would notice, and many of you would prefer, the mild mid-bass boost on the Sonys to the more neutral voicing of the Audio-Technicas. It sounds odd for me to say that, but I do think there's a phenomenon with headphones where because you don't have any air movement in the room as you would with a live band or with a speaker type setup, some of you will inevitably prefer a little bit of a mid-bass bump to recover some of what's lost in just the air movement in traditional listening environments, and the small bass boost of the Sonys might be slightly preferable to you. On the other hand, if you listen to a lot of music that's got significant upper frequency content, I don't think the Audio-Technica is ideal, but the price point is really exceptional. So I think you would slightly prefer the Audio-Technicas. They're both good headphones. They're both quite listenable. You need to decide on your budget whether that extra $90 or so for the Audio-Technicas is something that is minor to you, or is that a major expenditure. If it's a major expenditure, I would consider trying the Sonys first and see how you like them. Anyway, I was impressed. I love finding a great value. You probably like finding a great value too. I think you would enjoy these headphones, and you could go and listen to them because they're easy to find and see if it's really up your alley. I did, as a final comment, I did drive them with very high quality sources. I used a lot of high resolution audio. I used my DCS Lena headphone amp, which is not something you would normally ever use with this, but I also tried it with the Chord Mojo, and I thought the Chord Mojo drove these headphones just fine. So I don't think you need any spectacular amplification. I just use my reference setup to take one variable out of the equation. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. It helps you find new reviews that we publish, but it also helps other people find the channel. Also click on the notification bell. That's an additional enhancement to your ability to find out about new videos. Please subscribe to our newsletter, and of course, we've been publishing our magazine for over 30 years, and I think you would also enjoy that if you're really into the audio scene. Thanks for joining us.